doing so, I hope to reduce the risk of imposing my own subjective views. But I am certainly going to fail, at least to some extent, so it is probably useful for you to know a bit about my beliefs, which in economic jargon we call our priors, to emphasize our willingness to change them if new facts emerge. As John Maynard Keynes is often credited with saying to a critic, "When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?" The best summary of my priors is probably that I am a free market liberal. I believe that free markets work best, provided that we agree on what we mean by free markets. I believe that markets are free when they are not subject to arbitrary political interference, and when incumbents are not artificially protected from competitive new entrants. Keeping the markets free sometimes requires government interventions, but markets are certainly not free when governments expropriate private property, when incumbents are allowed to suppress competition, or when they successfully lobby to protect their rents. I am also liberal in the sense that I believe that reducing inequality is a worthwhile goal. I don't believe that inequality is evil. Inequality is necessary to reward success and punish failure, and it would be pointless to argue against that. But I believe that, on balance, there are more forces in our economic system pushing toward excessive, unjust, or inefficient inequality than there are forces pushing toward excessive equality. These are my prior beliefs as I write this book. They should be debated, and they can certainly be challenged. I will try not to let them interfere with my thinking, but I will not ignore the potential value in the belt and suspenders approach. On data, anecdotes, and intuition. "Data, data, data!" he cried impatiently. "I can't make bricks without clay." Arthur Conan Doyle, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. I should like to close by citing a well-recognized cliché in scientific circles. In God we trust. Others must provide data. Edwin R. Fisher, professor of pathology, addressing a subcommittee of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1978. If economists are to be of any use to society, a big if, some critics might add, then, at the very least, they should be able to challenge common wisdom, to take a contrarian perspective, and to avoid repeating what everyone else is saying. This is what I find so remarkably refreshing in Robert Gordon's The Rise and Fall of American Growth. Contrary to the techno-optimists arguing that innovation has never been faster, Bob argues that our current wave of innovation is not nearly as transformative as previous waves have been. Bob may or may not be right, but he is willing to think coherently about a topic and base his conclusions on data and logic, instead of anecdotes and preconceived ideas. It is also important to emphasize that smart people often disagree, and that is mostly a good thing. In fact, I would argue that we are more likely to learn something interesting precisely when smart people disagree. In a 2014 conversation with James Bennett in The Atlantic, Microsoft founder Bill Gates said, "I think the idea that innovation is slowing down is one of the stupidest things anybody ever said." To illustrate his point, he added, "Take the potential of how we generate energy, the potential of how we design materials, the potential of how we create medicines, the potential of how we educate people." Entrepreneurs are birds-in-the-bush people, while economists are more birds-in-the-hand people. We are certainly interested in the potential applications of an idea, but we need to see its impact in the data to be convinced. And so far, we are not convinced by Gates's emphasis on potential. Until the data suggest otherwise, we tend to follow Stefan Zweig and think that Brazil is the country of the future, and always will be. It is never easy to change the common wisdom. The idea that the U.S. markets are the most competitive in the world has been widely accepted in economics for several decades. Businessmen argue that it's never been easier to start a business, that competition is everywhere, and that the internet allows people to search for the cheapest goods. We certainly live in the most competitive, most breathtakingly innovative society ever. Right? To some extent, these arguments reflect a universal bias in human psyche, namely the idea that we are smarter and more sophisticated than our ancestors, and that everything we do is